Officer Nicholas Reardon. Okay, let's get into this mess. Now that even though now all the body cam footage is out there and everything is, the evidence is plainly in everybody's face. What happened that day? People still want to backseat quarterback it and run and talk. So my turn. Okay, for those who are not up to speed, he is the officer who shot that 16-year-old girl in Columbus, Ohio. That 16-year-old girl who was in the process of stabbing another girl. A girl who was doing nothing but who was holding her dog when the police showed up. Now it's up to speed. Everybody wants to say, well, he could have done this. He could have done that. He should have used a taser. He should have used this. Okay, let's break down what he could have used to diffuse the situation. What could have possibly been on his belt as a street cop? First of all, I'm not aware of the taser policy in Columbus, Ohio, but every department is different. There are departments that won't allow you to carry a taser until you've been on the job a certain amount of time. But let's say hypothetically he has one. That girl she was charging towards this other girl with a knife in her hand, and that was a pretty good sized knife. Now the taser, for those who again don't understand how they work, you have to present the taser, you have to flip the safety button off, and then there's a light that's supposed to come on, and you pull the trigger. That all in all takes maybe 3 seconds to deploy a taser. From the time you draw it to the time you fire it, 3 seconds, and it shoots out these two little prongs. Even then, even if he still hit her with the taser, tasers do not work 100% of the time like you see in the movies. It's not like it is in the movies. As soon as the prongs stick, it's instantaneous muscular lockup and the person just falls to the ground. There are multiple stories, videos, the evidence is out there for all those who are willing to go seek it. Tasers do not work. They don't. Simple as that. The only way tasers work effectively is if you take the cartridge off and you stick the little electrons directly on somebody's skin. Then they'll work perfectly. Then you'll get that instantaneous muscular lockup, but you still have to run up to the person and tase them, which would have still given her enough time to stab that girl. Next, pepper spray. Her head was turned, so the only thing that pepper spray would have done, it would have sprayed the back of her head, and it would have run off into that other girl's face. And that girl would have been pepper sprayed in the face, and then still stabbed by the other girl. It's facts. I promise you, I'm not lying to you. Now next, most cops carry what's called a collapsible baton. I don't think I have to get into how bad that would have looked if he'd have ran up to her and started hitting her with a baton. The media would have immediately lost their minds over that one. That is still a bad call. Or some cops have it, some cops don't. There's this little thing they carry on their keys. It looks like a spike. It's called a compliance tool. You run up behind somebody. You don't stab them with it. You just kind of press it into their back. Makes them very uncomfortable. Usually they'll stop what they're doing, but I don't think in that case it would have done no good. He did not have enough time to do that. He didn't. Let's just admit, no matter what he did, he was damned if he did, he was damned if he didn't. Even if hypothetically he'd have got out of his car and he'd have had his patrol shotgun loaded with beanbag rounds. A beanbag round, still, if he'd have shot that beanbag round, the most effective way he could have used it to stop her immediately would have been if he'd have hit her up towards her head, which would have still killed her. It would have. It would have hit her in the head, snapped her neck, she'd have been dead before she hit the ground. And we'd still be in the same situation. A rubber bullet? Rubber bullet's like getting hit with a paintball. Yeah, it hurts, but are you going to stop what you're doing? No. A pepper ball gun? Still, same deal. The pepper balls would have hit, the powder would have went in the air, and everybody standing there would have got a face full of pepper spray. Nothing he did would have been right in that situation in the eyes of the media, because as soon as it came out, the only two factors you need is a white cop and a black person. And all of a sudden, you're going to compare that cop to Derek Chauvin. You're going to compare that victim to George Floyd. Everybody wants to say, well, the police need to be more accountable. The police should be held more accountable. The police are held to a higher standard and to a higher standard of accountability than most of us will never see or understand. In good departments. Now, are there bad departments out there where maybe cops are sliding through the cracks? Yeah, possibly. Do they need to be found? Yeah. Do they need to be shut down? Of course they do. All the 99.9% of cops out there are good. But yet it's the 1% that's making everybody look bad. Yes, I agree. The 1% that's making everybody look bad, all the bad cops need to be weeded out and gotten rid of. But you keep throwing out words like accountability, and all I want to do is laugh. And here's why. If somebody would have held George Floyd accountable, he'd still be alive. He'd still be alive today. And this whole mess wouldn't have happened. Call me racist, call me what you will, but it's fact. If somebody in his life who cared about him would have held him accountable, then that whole incident at the Chinese food place wouldn't have happened. And Derek Chauvin wouldn't have been called that day. If somebody would have held, if somebody in Breonna Taylor's life would have held her accountable with the people she was hanging around and got her away from that crowd of people, she'd still be alive today. If somebody would have held Eric Teledo accountable, the 13-year-old who was shot in Chicago, he'd still be alive today. You want to talk about accountability? Try holding your own people accountable first.